All right. Let's see if we're all good to go here and we can start yip yapping about this. Let me just make sure we're live on the YouTube, which it certainly looks like we are. All right, cool. Unfortunate. I'm streaming it in 720. I'm going to do it at 1080. Big rip, not going to restart. So what this video is I'm assuming that there's a lot of people who don't know who I am, or you might be viewing this throughout the day. Okay, just getting some things out of the way. First off, I'm Brandon. I've been, playing DFS full time for since before COVID at this point. Um, I don't do like picks videos, and nor is this a beginner type of video or anything along those sorts. I'm not really here. I mean, obviously we're going to be talking about players and stuff, but this is not going to be a core video or anything of that sort. This is just me discussing how I go through my process in terms of just building for a tournament. Now, little history on how I play, specifically showdown contests, whether it's NBA or NFL. Typically, um, I did single entry for a long time. And my process will be the exact same. It just back then I would zero in on one lineup that I wanted to run, and I would run that in literally every single entry contest you could find. All the 15s, the 40s, the 27, 24, whatever, right? And that's what I would do for the majority of the standalone NFL games, Monday night, Thursday night, all that type of stuff. I've had a successful year. I have a bankroll that I can pretty much like kind of throw away at on NFL, and so I'm going to play pretty aggressively and do the same things that I was doing for finding my single entry lineups as that was finding me a lot of success, and I want to do that on a much bigger level here. I'll be talking about both DraftKings and FanDuel today, and just discussing how I go through things of that nature. And you can see how I use the tools that we have here at TrueDFS, how I use the projections, and just how you can use TrueDFS to potentially benefit you with how you play DFS. So let's go ahead and start, and let's jump into this. Right. First and foremost, I want to get this out of the way that we are partnered not only with SaberSim, but we are also partnered with PayDirt Analytics and Stake Kings as well. So obviously, if you want to sign up for Stake Kings, you can sign up through us. And um, with PayDirt and stuff, you have all of James's tools up here. You can go to NFL and you can look at the PayDirt tools and stuff. And then we also have SaberSim as our other partner and stuff. So on all of our packages outside of the NASCAR only one, because we would just encourage you to get the SaberSim package. You basically get 3 sites in one for all of these packages that you see here outside of obviously just the NASCAR stuff, which is my NASCAR projections. Okay, so I understand it's the start of the NFL season. I understand it's the first game of the season. I understand it's the first week. A lot of people are selling stuff. I mean, that's what you have to do in the industry, But really hard pressed to find a better value than this, especially if I understand it's expensive if you're one of those guys who isn't throwing a lot of money at DFS in general. But if you are paying any substantial amount of money on these sites, it's very, very difficult to find pricing much better than this for practically 3 sites in one. So yeah, not gonna annoy you with selling stuff. If you like, what I'm doing here, consider joining using the tools that we have. Bobby won $1 million last year. He's a millionaire winner. Sheets has been killing it over the course of the last few years and just in general. But I mean, I think the results speak for themselves and stuff. Anyway, let's go ahead and look at both SaberSim. So what we're going to do first is, before we even attempt to look at what lineups we're playing, where we're going at, my view, and all this was done on like Monday and stuff. So I'm going to be updating this as well, which let me do that right now, just so we are updated on because I've been moving, been stuff. This is the first time I've actually been able to, or today's been the first time I've been here. Triple J, Bobby is currently traveling right now. I believe he's in British Columbia at the moment right now. He'll be back, I believe, next week. I don't think he's going to get back in time to play DFS or be here for Sunday, but he's been enjoying life with his kid and traveling and stuff. Let's see. Biggest prop bet so far, blue anytime touch. I mean, we'll see. Also, let me get this. Let me get my stuff updated here, just so I can put this in. And yet again, we're talking both DraftKings and FanDuel. We'll be talking about both of the slates here today. Let me download this and get this re-upload it here. With what we're doing. Yep, let's do that. Okay, so and then obviously we're gonna just restart everything, right? Because I was just getting that to put lineups in. So first and foremost, before we change anything, which let's go ahead and just at least make sure that we're going to use Goldie's projections for this situation here, just a standalone thing. Let me make sure that obviously it's showing I have people who are out because obviously I have dummy lineups that haven't been updated, whatever, right? Okay, so first and foremost, what I do is, which is this how I use the tools here. We're not going to make any adjustments at this point. We're not using this to make the lineups right off the point of what I'm playing. I want to see what the field is doing in the captain right off the bat. Okay. Now, yet again, if you're with us, you have multiple projection sources, whether it be TrueDFS, or whether it be Goldie stuff, whether it be Sheets' stuff, because when he's playing, he's updating his numbers as well, whether it's pay dirt stuff, whether you want to use SaberSim, whatever the case may be. We can look at the flagship that SaberSim has. We can just look at Goldie stuff, whatever you want to do. We can average them all. Doesn't matter. Okay. We just need an idea of where the ownership is landing on people. Okay. I made a video on, I think it was yesterday. I'm talking about how I'm wanting to play aggressive and yada, yada, yada. But now that we're actually in here, okay, we can talk about where we want to make those moves and stuff. So first and foremost, did in single entry, but committing to it full time this year. Absolutely no quarterbacks in the captain, right? Likelihood. Now, normally they have a hit rate of like 25, 20, in that range, right? But usually there will be a player that will be outscoring both quarterbacks. Also, want to segue, big asterisk, okay? We need to get this out of our system now, okay? We don't need to be wasting our time with this type of stuff. So-and-so can catch an 80-yard touchdown. So-and-so can find broken coverage and score. That can happen to any player, okay? That type of so-and-so can break off and score. Oh, he's min salary. He can do that is live for any player at any given time, okay? So I don't just, as we go through this live show and stuff, personally for me, that doesn't do anything. If like, oh, so-and-so, wide receiver 4 on this team can break something, like whatever, right? That can happen with anybody at any time, at any point in any game, okay? We don't need to be focusing on that. But for the most part, somebody will be outscoring the quarterback. Now, usually, and it doesn't always fall this way, but normally that is wide receiver 1 on either team, wide receiver 2 on any team, potentially running back 1 on either team, and tight end 1 on either team, right? But in terms of figuring out where the field is going, what they're potentially building with, how to, get different or whatever, right? As stated, you can see I'm maxing out the Millie Maker, I'm maxing out the $5, I'm playing drastically other stuff, different, like, I am more than willing to have lineups that are dead on arrival to try and get different from the field. As stated, that's why this is a tournament show, just breakdown and stuff like that. And I appreciate the 14 you guys watching here. So before we do anything, I want to just build and see what the field might potentially be playing, what the lineups are looking like, okay, before we start Xing stuff out. We're not going to change anything on salary. We're not going to change anything. We're not going to X out anybody. I want to specifically see what the field is building like. What can we do to get different? Because the only data point that matters in DFS, okay, it's not projections. It's ownership. This is the only data point that matters, okay? Obviously, if you have bad projections or whatever, that's going to affect your thing. But at this point, projections are pretty rock solid, even if they're just mean projections and stuff. They're pretty good at what they do, right? We don't necessarily need to. I forgot the point I was going to make there. We don't got to worry about, projected points or whatever. It's all about what the field is doing, where ownership is, and stuff like that. As we look at the, let me actually run the Sims here, and then I can sort by projected score, and we'll look at the Millionaire Maker just because I want to visually be able to show and go through lineups and stuff like that. When we look at, this is DraftKings, right? Yes. When we look at where the field is building, okay, they're typically playing the safer play because on a point projection basis, Jalen Hurts is going to be the highest projected guy. from a floor perspective in this. Typically, the quarterbacks are going to be there, right? And then, you're going to have your running backs, whatever, right? But usually on the outcome of actual games, okay, you're going to have a wide receiver in most games, at least one wide receiver is going to go for 6 catches and 82 yards, right? So we're right around, give or take 15 points for a wide receiver, if not two of them and stuff. Usually that's right where quarterbacks and these guys end up. If a wide receiver does anything more than that, he's going to eclipse them in terms of points, and that's going to cause those lineups to pass the other ones and stuff. So what I want to do is look at these lineups specifically here, and I haven't used the new Saber Sim a lot, so I do apologize. I'm looking for the which I might not be able to break them down the way I wanted to here. I wanted to have the instead of the let's see, let me see if it's here. There we go. Okay, that's what I wanted to see here. Okay, so when we're looking at the pool of lineups, okay, that are being built, yet again, I have so and so amount of lineups, whatever, right? Obviously, I'm by default just thrown into all the contests, whatever. But when I sort them by highest projected lineup, with which right off the bat typically is going to be lineups that are projecting well for cash, lineups that are looking or anticipating to be duplicated a lot, whether you're doing, now I don't play cash, but whether you're playing contest or whatever, right? If the field is projected to have 17% of Jalen Hurts in the captain, what do those lineups look like? Okay, we're typically seeing that those lineups are probably going to be tight on salary. We see a 49.3, a 49.9 here. Obviously, this might just seem, elementary and a baseline starter stuff of how we are going through this, right? But as we look at the Jalen Hurts lineups, which I know for a fact, obviously I'm not playing because I'm not saying or I already said I'm not playing QB captains, even with exceptions of Lamar Jackson. I'm just not doing it. Okay, I want to get different, right? And I'm looking at what are lineups that are highly projected. Where are things going? Obviously, this one doesn't have Saquon. This one does. This one does. We look at the amount of ownership with the um, Jalen Hurts lineups. Obviously, it's Brown, Barkley, Dak Prescott, and quite a lot of them. Because typically, if you're looking to have a generic cash lineup, sorry, this is house related stuff. I'll deal with that later. If you're looking to rack up most of the scoring, typically 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, or just people that are most likely going to be involved in touchdowns and stuff like that. Okay, so we're just going through, yet again, we're not playing these lineups. We're just paying attention to what the field is doing, okay? We're seeing that, yet again, it has a lot of Dak, as you can see, the exposure rates, and we're just looking at projected lineups or predicted score in these lineups. We're not looking at we're not looking at anything past that. This is a long, tedious process of stuff, right? But this is where the exposure rates of the Jalen Hurts lineups are going at, right? So, and you can also look at it a different way. If you're dead set on playing Jalen Hurts lineups, you probably just want to embrace, well, obviously, just in DFS, you want to embrace variance, right? But you probably want to be over the field on people that aren't being played as much with the Jalen Hurts lines and be lower on the people who are, because you want to get different, right? Okay, so we're looking at lineups that are probably going to be pretty tight on salary. Obviously, and yet again, we're going to fly down and look at the 97 lineup just to obviously there's the top 100. We're going to look at the 97th lineup. 49.1. We're still deep in the heart of value territory, or still deep in the heart of $1,000 next to the top of the 50,000, right? Even here, we still see Jalen Hurts, Prescott, Smith, Pickens, Jake Elliott, Turpin. Okay. Now, obviously, it's getting a bit, since we've gone through, 90, top scoring lines, that's when you start getting Pickens. That's when you start getting 2 kickers involved. But still, these are lineups that are all expected to be played and owned in some form or fashion, as you can see with the ownership that this lineup has. Okay. So that is the Jalen Hurts line. So just right off the baseline, we're seeing that the highest projected captain, Jalen Hurts, gonna be, a lot of those lineups are gonna be pretty tight on salary, which is indicating a lot of the value. Yet again, if we sort, and yet again, I know this might be boring, but I would encourage you to use the tools at your disposal to understand what the field is doing and what your opponents are doing. Okay. as stated, that's why we see Turpin in these lineups, at such a high eclipse rate, because we're having to pay up for so many people in those Jalen Hurts lineups. That's why we're seeing value plays be, very prevalent and stuff. That's why we see obviously the kickers and stuff. We see Turpin, we see the other guy Tolbert as well. Now, not in as many, okay, but still being included here and stuff. That's why. That's what the Jalen Hurts lineups are expected to look like if you're building with Jalen Hurts in the captain, which we are not. But yet again, we're being aware of what the field is doing. Same thing with Saquon. We can look at what these lineups are doing here. Now, yet again, this is sorted by highest projected. We didn't cap the salary. We're just looking at what the builds are like. Okay. Now that we've done the Jalen Hurts lineups, we can now look at the Saquon Barkley lineups, and we're probably going to see a very similar situation here. And you're also going to see, hey, it's not that much different. Barkley, Hurts, Prescott, Ferguson, Elliott, Turpin, same, very similar situation here. We're seeing that they're roughly, projected to score the same, right? I mean, these are going to be on a mean projection basis, side by side and stuff. Yet again, as started with that asterisk, Saquon Barkley can go for 200 yards and 6 touchdowns. Yep, he can, just like anybody could. Okay, that's not viable to the discussion at all. Okay, we're just looking at lineups and understanding what the field is doing. Yet again, pretty tight on salary. Pretty much needing to go to value plays and stuff like that. Which, not saying you can't do that, but this is what the field is doing. And personally, I don't really want to be copying the field and also having to deal with duplications and have my slate dependent on what some $400 guy can do, right? Because there's a lot of situations to where somebody who's min price can catch a touchdown at the the 1 yard line or whatever, gain the 6 points, 7 for catching, whatever, end up with 8.5, 9 points and still not be useful, just due to how drastically high the highest scoring guy on the slate was, or due to salary constraints and stuff. So I just don't necessarily want to do that. I also want to look at the amount of, or I guess we really can't do this if we're doing it like this. Let's go ahead and look here. Let's compact this, and I want to see yet again when we can even remove that. Let's remove Hurts and Barkley from the equation. And let's look specifically at what the wrong one. Let's go ahead and look at what the salary is for the remainder of these. Okay, now this is lineups, and yet again, it's just the top 100 or so or whatever in this lineup pool or whatever. And we're looking at what type of salary we're also run into here. Okay, so obviously we see some that are still top 50 or 50,000. 499, 497, 499, 49. So we're seeing that even the first lineups that aren't using Hurts and Barkley, or CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, all these guys that look good, they're still very close to the salary. Okay, we're still very, very close. Now this is a 48-3. We don't know what lineup this is. That's not necessarily important. We're just looking at what the salaries are at. Yet again, now once we get through like some some variance or some higher projected guys, then you start getting really tight again. 49.9, 45 or 50,000, 50,000, 49.5, 49.9, 50,000, 49.6. You get the point. As we talk about, as I've talked about, Cheats talks about everything, whether it be tennis, UFC, whatever. We're looking to not be as duplicated as possible. If you play a lot of League of Legends or esports, this is a default thing you have to worry about. In LPL slates, LCK slates, whatever, you typically have trains of the optimal lineup. Okay, now yet again we're playing just this Thursday, this slate for today is a 174,000 entry, or 176,000 entries. Okay, we're going to have duplications. Okay, we want to minimize the duplications that we have in a slate this big, in your pool, whatever. Like we're looking to not be duplicated. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, it's playing different captains than what the field is doing. Okay, and it's specifically leaving salary, but not in just a way to leave it off. Okay, yet again, if we're just say, for example, if we're looking for a CeeDee Lamb lineup that the field might potentially play because it's highly projected, the highest projected CD Lamb lineup based on the projection source that we're using, which I forgot at this point because it's not relevant right now. It is the 240th lineup, okay, which is CD Lamb, Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Prescott, Turpin, and Luke. Okay, this is a which is typically based on projections. It's usually going to be a lineup that is very close to using the max salary because it's a pivot off of the favorite captains based on a mean projection. You're also doing that specifically to try and get money in order to jam more people in from a base perspective or from a base projection to get them in your lineup. Okay, so we typically find that even the first lineups that are using pivot captains and stuff are very close to using the entire salary. Let's see. Well, here's a 49.6. I was going to say, how far do we have to go down to start seeing people who aren't in there? We want to avoid lineups that are using the pivot off the main guys or the pivot off the pivot that are also using max salary. Okay, now this sounds like it's a lot, and it is. You know, takes a lot of time. This takes a lot of money. Okay, I've I've grinded enough to where I can kind of sound snooty about that or whatever, right? But I've worked hard to be able to do this. It takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money to potentially land on situations that won't be as owned as the rest of the field, right? So we have determined just right off the bat, a lot of people using Jalen Hurts, a lot of people using Saquon, a lot of people using a lot of the salary. We're seeing why the value plays at the bottom end of the salary are so highly used, just due to how tight or how expensive pricing is up top. We're seeing that there is a slight lean towards AJ Brown over Devontae Smith, even in the flex positions, right? We're seeing that it's lean AJ Brown 33%, and then Devontae Smith at 28. Okay, so just seeing where a baseline is, where we can potentially get different from the field and find leverage and advantages. Because right now DFS is very, very difficult. Everybody has these great tools, whether you're using SaberSim or whatever. Okay, the field in general is smarter than it was last year. However, there are, if we look at a line or we look at a contest, obviously the sites take their rake, and then realistically, there's like 8 to 12% of the people who are just morons, deadlines, throwing money away. Like these people, you look at them, you hear them speak, and you don't even know why they vote in local elections, and then you just get angry at it because I'm not even getting political. These idiots are just voting on what your tax dollars are going to, and or they have no clue what they're voting on. They just they walk into a grocery store, have no idea what they do or what they're doing, and they just stand there look around. 8% of the population in these contests are just morons, right? But then the rest of the field is people who are actually aware of prop betting, of DFS. They're potentially looking at or watching videos. They're not just going in, blind. They at least have some type of concept of what to play for. So, or how to play. So everything's much more difficult now. So, what are we going to do about it? Okay, now I'm recording this at 11:53 my time. I'm north of Houston right now. Usually, I would not be making lineups this early. I would wait till inactives are announced 90 minutes before the game, but it's the first game. There's really not any injury news to be worried about. Now, obviously, the three outside of Saquon, Smith, Brown, Goddard. I believe they were all on the injury report, or they didn't practice much during preseason for the Eagles. But at this point, nobody's on the report that would indicate them not playing. We should not have any news that really shakes up any starting lineups or anything like that for the field, so we can actually start going through here. Now, obviously, if anything changes or whatever, and ownerships will change once we get closer. So I'll probably rerun with ownerships much closer to the start of the slate. But really, outside of that, we're kind of rock solid to see what all is going to be going on in this slate. I want to move that to that priority. Where are we at here? Okay, make sure. So we understand that we don't want to play the quarterbacks. Okay, so what am I specifically doing? I'm removing Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott from the captain range. Okay, now with that said, I also and I've done it before in single entry when I just have one lineup and stuff. Sometimes, yes, I will venture down and play a value captain in an expensive single entry, and I need to, just I need to get in. I need to try and compete. I need to whatever. Let's jam it in. That's slate dependent. Today, I don't want to worry about a cheap captain being involved in this stuff here. So actually, we're gonna work backwards and say who I want to be a captain. Now, obviously, Philadelphia is an eight and a half, almost 9 point favorite over the Cowboys. Okay, and I'd really, really encourage you. Now, I don't like sports. Okay, I never liked sports growing up. I hated playing them growing up. If I did not have money on this stuff, I would not be watching sports. So I can very easily remove myself from the equation, and I really don't put a lot of my own biases or my own beliefs on what a game might be like, and I just look at the data. Okay, but it seems like that Dallas will be behind, so that would indicate that they would probably throw at a much greater rate than what the Eagles will throw at. It also indicates that if there's a big enough gap, okay, Dallas might be in the position to abandon kicking field goals and go for it on fourth down more often. Okay, so they are looking to be much more viable in their air attack versus the Eagles, right? I'm just walking through my process through like everything. So I'm sorry if we are, um, doing baby 101 stuff, but I'm really trying to not confuse anybody or just explain where I'm at. Okay. So because of that, I think CeeDee Lamb obviously makes a lot of sense at um, being a captain. AJ Brown. Okay. Okay. Also, I really like Pickens. Okay. Now, I'm not going to let my bias get into that. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use whatever they end up giving me on Pickens, but I want Pickens in here because I think just from a skill perspective, okay, this is elevating the Cowboys offense because last year was just CeeDee Lamb. Okay. They're going to be behind. Dak's going to be throwing more. Okay. Since he's not just going to be looking at Lamb the entire time, it would indicate that Pickens might get more targets than normal. He's much cheaper than a lot of these players and stuff. We've determined that Devontae Smith is really not being played at all in the captain. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but if I had $3,000 in lineups, which we're looking at nearly 300, we have over 300 lineups. I want a little bit more than 6% of those lineups having Devontae Smith in there to be able to capitalize on the situation if Devontae Smith gets in there. I also understand that if Devontae Smith doesn't do anything, that 7-8% of whatever I end up with are going to be dead lineups. That's why, like I just have to embrace that. Hey, man, I understand those Devontae Smith lineups are not going to work if he doesn't do anything. Okay, that's part of just being comfortable. I also now, secondly, because I know people had asked about it yesterday, the running back situation with Dallas. Okay, yes, Williams, he's looking to carry, a normal amount, whatever. I'm not really concerned about that. As stated before, Dallas should be behind in here. If it was a much closer game, that might be a argument or a situation where I'd be looking more at those lineups if the game was much closer. But since they're projected to be down, I'm going to lean more towards the pass catchers on Dallas. I also want to add Goddard and Ferguson. Okay, now this is just yet again all I've been doing is moving, driving around, listening to stuff. I just listen. I don't have any thoughts of my own when it comes to this stuff. The industry, maybe not a lot. Obviously, we're at 4%, but the industry or a lot of smart people are like, hey, Ferguson might see an uptick in his offensive production with Dak under center and them having to throw more and stuff like that. And at this point, I have leveraged myself off of Jalen Hurts, off of Barkley, off of Prescott ownership, okay, at captain. So any portion of the field, that 17 that has Hurts, that 14 that has Barkley, that 7 that has Dak, okay, I'm not tying with them. I don't have duplications with them. I don't have any of that stuff, okay? I've determined positions where I want to be different from the field. Now, I'd be like, Brandon, if you're being that aggressive, why don't you have more ownership to these guys down here? What about the kickers? What if the kickers are needed? Well, it's not projected to be a game where the kickers are going to be needed. Those are usually much closer games low scoring games. Same thing with defenses. This is just a slate, yet again, slate by slate basis or whatever. Or yeah. But I'm not using defenses or kickers on this slate for my captain. I don't really want to be using anybody down here. So this is where we're at. Also, at this point, usually, I just in the past, obviously, we're building here. In the past, uh, I usually, normally, always do 4-2s. Okay, because usually the field usually builds balanced lineups with 3-3s, or 4-4s, or not 4-4s, 4-2s on whatever favorite side there is. Okay, I usually do 4-2s with the 4 leaning towards the team that I believe is having to play catch up and having to score more. Okay. Now, yet again, that's what I used to play. That's what I did a lot of single entry. That's what I go through. But I just found myself doing a lot of 4-4s or a lot of 4-2s and stuff, much at a much higher rate than what the field would do. I'm hoping that I naturally get to that, but we shall see as we get here. Now, when we look at the flex positions and stuff here, um, do I want to lock anybody in? Do I not want to do that? I personally don't, especially yet again with how tight this slate is. If it was drastically different, I saw that Pope said, he likes some Prescott captain. Really, the only people that I would do that, and when I did do captain quarterbacks in the past, it would actually be like onslaughts for that team. So like Josh Allen plus trying to get like 3 to 4 of his players, right? Mahomes, 3 to 4 guys. I don't envision now. That's just what I would do when I would play him to get differently because, as indicated, we see this ownership here. If I was playing Jalen Hurts, it'd be very difficult to do that because he has so many guys on his team that are so expensive. But I would try and get as many Philadelphia guys in there as possible versus the lines that we were looking at earlier. So if you're dead set on playing, a Dak lineup or a Hurts lineup, be aware of what those lineups are looking like, and then try and build differently from that. Anyway, I don't there's nobody here that I really want to goof around with here. I understand how tight pricing is going to be, and I understand that we'll probably have some exposure down here just with the amount of lineups that I'm running with. The second thing I want to do is I do want to be under the field and not even worry about lineups that are near the salary. Now, this is slate by slate, sport dependent. Okay. In UFC, I'm usually much more aggressive on it because there's less matches and less players. Here, I'm still running a huge amount of potential captains. So I'm just using 49.8. I'm perfectly okay with that. I understand that. Hey, if a lineup that uses 49.9 on the salary is optimal today, I'm just not going to have it. Okay, but I'm mainly just focusing on trying to not get duplications and stuff like that for um, the stuff here. As this loads, where they're going to run the sims and the portfolio management that SaberSim has added this year has been incredibly well. Let's not show any of that because now yet again I'm gonna rerun it. I'm gonna rerun it again with ownerships and stuff, or with updated ownership closer to lock. But I just don't want to be given whatever I want away, right? But the portfolio diversity tool that SaberSim has implemented has been very beneficial for me personally. I don't think I'd have those GPP takedowns and the run I had at the end of August without that or without those updates and stuff. And on top of just how I naturally play a little bit more aggressively and stuff, it has benefited me tremendously and stuff. While this loads, I'm going to go ahead and look at what the chat is saying here. Like to build the best 300 I can and chop it down by projected points within 12 points of the optimal cut teams. Yes, I also do that too. Maybe not necessarily in football, but like NASCAR. And this is the same thing I do in NASCAR. And I've talked about this in more detail. Just usually in a NASCAR show, I have to do way more analogies, just because NASCAR is so volatile. Everybody understands how DFS football works and the projections included in that. Why? Let's see. So let's see what my exposure percentage is with these guys here. I haven't, I have sorted everything through. But even with this here, I am perfectly happy with this type of exposure ratings, okay? AJ Brown is a direct pivot off of both Hurts and Barkley, okay? Why is that? Well, Barkley's projected Eagles are ahead, okay? Because of that, Barkley would be projected to outscore Brown in most situations, okay? Um, so we're getting different there, okay? We're using Jalen Hurts in a different way than the field is doing, okay? We're also, getting much more of Devontae Smith, obviously, Lamb and Pickens and stuff. But now the reason why this is here is just right off the bat. This is the most because I've done this enough to know what it's doing. This AJ Brown is being shown as, hey, if you're trying to get different, your most highest upside with that while getting different and stuff is AJ Brown because it's just different from what the field is doing. Okay. If you weren't comfortable with this, you would probably want to swap Hill and Brown here, not Hill, Lamb and Brown here, and possibly have more Brown and stuff. Um, but like I'm perfectly satisfied with this because this is really all that I kind of care about at the end of the day, right? When we look at the flex, and yet again, this is the amount of lines that we have here. I don't have duplications in my contest and stuff, which yet again, going forward in different slates, I would because usually, um, even before all my stuff, if I was entering contests, I would want the same lineups entered in each contest. Okay. A lot of people don't like that. I personally do because of when I run the situations, or I would like kill myself if I if I played a millionaire maker, right? And then I played a four and I hand build I mean, this is like back when I would used to, but like if I played a millionaire winner lineup in the $4 contest and not the millie, I don't think I could live that down. Okay, right? Now I've never done that. Okay, in all my NASCAR takedowns, I always enter lineups in two contests. So if I do have a winner, it's at least in the main GPP, right? Normally I would do that. Tonight is a special occasion to where, it's opening night of football. I'm minimizing the duplications that I have in my lineups. Okay, we also not only do we have the $15 millionaire maker, we also have a $5 that is um paying very well, 25,000 the first. If I'm focusing on not having duplications, I can live with this and like I'm not going to have a solo win, right? The showdown football, that's just not going to happen, right? This most likely ends up paying, 30,000 to however many people that would be, right? This most likely ends up paying, 3,500 or whatever to however many people, split it or whatever. I'm okay with that because there's so many people in this. It's opening night. There's a lot of dead money involved, people who don't know what they're doing. I'm perfectly fine having uniques in both of these contests. However, like tomorrow's game probably won't because the contest is much smaller. As I state that, let me just take a look really fast. Like tonight's 176, tomorrow's 88,000. I'll probably run the same lines in both the 20 and whatever other one there is. But for today, I'm okay with having unique lineups across the board here. It's 300 unique lineups, and then I'm also obviously playing, the 15 everything on FanDuel. So realistically, I'm going to have like 600 unique lineups across the two sites. I'm okay with that, right? I also view of where we're at now. Usually, okay, as stated of how I would do, based on the captains that I'm using. Okay, that's usually when I want to lock in or play a high amount of the people who the field is playing and the captain because they're projected to be well. Okay, that's why we see an 88% at Jalen Hurts, 64% Prescott, 50% Barkley and stuff. Okay, if I was running much smaller lines, like if I was doing 20, okay, like I do in NASCAR and other sports or whatever, I would play 100% Jalen Hurts and 100% Dak Prescott in those 20 lineups, okay? Because I'm trying to get different up top at the captain perspective, okay? So I just lock in to play guys who are expected to score well, the two quarterbacks, and then, try and get different and build from there. So I can find, different outs or do a lot of 1v1s. That's typically what I would do because I'm running, the amount of lines I'm at. I'm okay with not locking in any of these guys up here. Past that, you know, hey, Brandon, what's the running back situation with Dallas? I don't care. I don't know. Like, I'm doing my process. I'm doing everything that has shown for me to be successful or whatever. Having 32% Javonte Williams, I'm perfectly okay with that because the field is not really getting to one. They're questionable on him. Two, the pricing that they're having to use between Hertz and everybody else, like I'm okay with that. I'm not concerned about it at all. Right. Um, I don't really see anything usually, typically, and even here, like I just the way that I work out, whether it be any sport, if I'm running this amount of lineups and I see 0.09% Grant, whatever the heck this guy is called, I usually just X him out, right? If I have 600 lineups and this guy's in 3 of them, I think I can just X him out. Like I'm not I just don't see a reason to have that, right? Um but I'm not gonna do that right now. So at this point, I'm happy. I haven't looked at what's being played in these contests because I trust my process. I don't want any biases in anything that's going on. Okay, um, anything like that at all. I'm gonna just upload these so in case I get struck by lightning, or I guess I'd be dead, so it wouldn't matter then. But in case I lose power or whatever, those are locked into all my contests, right? So I don't have to, so like, and you can see I've already like entered all this type of stuff. So all that is in there, right? Now we can move on to FanDuel. Okay, that was just DraftKings. Okay, I know it wasn't a pick show. It wasn't anything like that. Okay, but that's how I play DFS. Okay, let me check the chat. If there's any thoughts or anything there. What is your thought on cheapo captains? Across the board, I would say no. Okay. Now, yet again, I'm just using this example uh, because I think it's the one that most people remember, or they don't. It's whatever. But last year, week 2, I played Tim Patrick, which if you were, I think you were here yesterday, listen to it anyway. I played a Tim Patrick captain in a Detroit and whoever slate, right? And Tim Patrick was like stupid cheap, and I did that just so I could play him, St. Brown, Gibbs, and then whoever else was on the slate, right? Like that was just the slate that I determined because yet again I was in single entry stuff, and I won like I don't know 8,000 or 7,000. I didn't win any of the contests, but I finished like seventh to like I think it was like most contests I finished between like fourth and like 15th or something in them. So it was like 7 grand on the night, right? And I only did that because I was in single entry. There was what I thought was a pretty big price discrepancy in terms of what upside was if I was playing him and what I didn't or whatever. And then, Tim Patrick had a game of life because he hadn't caught a fucking touchdown in like, 4 years or whatever, right? And he caught one. And it just so happened that, golf targeted him like 4 times or whatever, right? And I think Amara scored like 17. So he didn't run away with the slate. Everybody had him in cat, whatever. But I usually don't want to play cheap captains because I want to play captains that are going to be fighting to be the highest score on the slate. And since I haven't been home, I need to get this as well. Give me a second here. I haven't done this yet. I actually gotta get this one too. Hold on. What I have in here? Hold on. 1545, 103. I'm not gonna max this one out because that's I already got enough. Insufficient funds. Oh, yeah, Badoom. What the hell? 375. Whatever. I'll figure that out later. I don't know why I didn't take all that. Okay, so let me go here. Oh, it was just taking forever to go through, I guess. Okay. So let me go. That's this one. Yep. Okay. Let's go here. Let's go here. Let's go there. Let's go there. Okay. All right. Let's do the same thing again for FanDuel. Okay. Yet again, not a. Let me make sure all this is squared away. Skadoink. Move that there. Skadoink. Move that there. Why do I have 2 rushes here? Figure it out later. Not a dire concern right now. I'm going to use SaberSim for this one, okay? And yet again, SaberSim doesn't require you to make multiple changes and stuff, so we can just run things as it is. But now, everybody who has a brain, anybody who should be able to, also, let me make sure I'm not encroaching on Sheets' time, because I know Sheets is going live to talk MMA at 2:30 Eastern time, 1:30 my time, so I have still, okay. I didn't know if it was in 15 minutes or an hour and 15. So we're going to do the same thing for FanDuel. Now, obviously, FanDuel's made changes to their thing, right? Whatever, right? Duh. Okay, but what the fuck is this, dude? Why do we not have, what are we doing? What are we doing, FanDuel? Why do we not have separate ownership for, well, that's not very useful here. That's not very helpful at all. As you can tell, I don't play FanDuel Showdown much. I'm only here because of this. But I would envision that because they've changed it and it's half point PPR, you would still have the quarterbacks being used because everybody's used to just, I don't have to have that discussion. I've heard it so many times a day. I think both quarterbacks are going to be using the captain, right? And then Saquon. Now, the wide receivers would need much more assistance on FanDuel in order to start eclipsing to be the highest scoring guy on slates and stuff like that because of half point PPR and everything like that. But I've heard rumblings, okay, and Brian talked about this on the Occupy video today, that it seems like nobody wants to play the wide receivers, okay? So, seems like we're doing that. Like, it seems like it's like the second verse, same as the first on as DraftKings is, and I'll probably be much more condensed. I don't think I'll throw the tight ends in there, but for FanDuel, the captains I will use because of the same ideology, the same goals, the same thriving for uniqueness. It'll be Lamb, Brown, Smith, and George as my captains for FanDuel. I don't think we necessarily need to go over the same thing as we did for DraftKings. I mean, it's really the same view. But that's how I play tournaments. Okay, that's what I did for my WNBA stuff, my college football stuff, my UFC stuff, even when it didn't work. Okay, I'm not just saying that because of what happened, of all the wins I've had recently. I've been doing this even when it was close, but I didn't take anything down, or I couldn't celebrate profusely about it or whatever. This is just how I play. This is just what I do. I want to find leverage on the field. I want to try and get different. I want to try and get unique, and that's just how it is. Okay. That's why it's different than single entry, because for me, my single entry would probably be Brown or Lamb tonight, right? If I was playing it like normal, okay? Now because I'm able to have a little bit more, more lineups and stuff, that's why, hey, I like my process. I'll throw in Smith. Nobody's going to play Smith. I think it's worth being overweight, so on and so forth or whatever. I think that's mainly it. If anybody else in here, I mean, 20 of you guys in here right now, if you guys have any questions or anything that you want me to specifically look at or potentially look at, let me know over the next couple minutes. But I don't think there's really anything else to do. I'm gonna while I wait, I'm gonna look at the lineups that Hurts and Barkley. Yet again, same thing. I want to see what the field is doing on FanDuel in terms of if they're playing, if they're, if there's lineups that play the quarterbacks, what do those lineups look like? Okay, let's be aware, have an idea of what the field is doing, and so on and so forth, right? But yeah, that's how I look at it. So just the four, yeah, I think that's worth. And okay, so what in my head, what is the outcome? What is my expectation for tonight on any of these stuff? And I talked about that. I mean, Jay, I've been here for 48 minutes. You can put it back on 2x and you'll get to me. I was talking about, potentially if I'm, go 100% on people or whatever. I already discussed that a little bit in detail. Um, what is my expectation for tonight? Okay, between I got like 5 grand on the two sites or whatever. My expectation is to get $1,000 of that 5,000 back. That's like the baseline expectation. If it's anything more than that, it's been pretty decent. If I break even, oh, that's been a good night, right? Like that's been a phenomenal night. If I can break even, doing all this, that's phenomenal. If it's anything more than that, obviously, I don't know how likely it is. I'd give it for fan because especially with half point PPR, I think it's like 20% of the time a wide receiver will be the highest scorer on FanDuel, maybe 25. But I feel much more comfortable at 20. So I think this approach would work, and then you got to even be right there. Um, but I think we're looking at this working one out of like 5 slates or whatever, right? And that's just what I'm perfectly fine embracing that type of stuff. Let's go ahead and look at what these these are looking like. So obviously Jalen Hurts, Barkley, Prescott, Pickens, all these guys here. 57. I mean, it's gonna be like 1v1s and stuff. Obviously, a lot of people with Prescott and stuff, a lot of kickers involved. I mean, really same thing as DraftKings and stuff. I just want to be different from the field. I mean, we're looking at all these highest projected guys, and it's the quarterbacks by like a mile, by like a country mile, and because they're probably going to outscore the wide receivers on the slate, right? But this DFS, you just have to be overweight on things that the field aren't doing, even in situations where it's probably not going to work. You just keep playing, to try and be right when it does hit. That's why DFS, especially from people that I've talked to, I mean, obviously, I play poker here and there, but not at the any volume that like matters. If you're bad at poker, you don't know, right? You could be bleeding money for months, right? In DFS, you could also be bad and you can lose money in an instant, right? And then in DFS, you could also be good and go on a losing streak for a huge amount of time, right? Um, yeah, I mean that's that's really the secrets. I don't know. Like, DFS is expensive, man. Just so I don't know how viable the not even viable. I don't know what, especially on FanDuel, it seems like CD Lamb would be the main wide receiver to outscore the two quarterbacks in Barkley. Uh, but even then, he probably has like a 15% hit rate on that. I got the 20 to 25 based on the other guys. I mean, I'm very curious. I'm just gonna be very aggressive on this one because it's the first one that FanDuel has changed. For whatever reason, people just seem like they can't wrap their brains around that on FanDuel. So I just want to be overweight on that type of stuff. Um, yeah, this is a tournament video of some of the stuff I'm doing. Maybe this helps. Maybe it doesn't. If you are so inclined, if you would really like to use the tools that I use, if you'd like to talk with me, if you'd like to chit chat with me and stuff like that, do consider joining us here. We do have a code right now, NFL 2025, all caps, all numbers, no spaces. Go ahead and put it in chat here for you. If you use code NFL 2025, you get 33% off your first month of any of these packages. And that's really it. I know there's a lot of sites out there that are offering much bigger discounts and stuff, but we basically have 3 sites in one. 33% off our first month is realistically the best type of deal that we can give based on the amount of tools that we have, based on the amount of partners we have, based on the amount of just stuff that we offer. I think I think it'd be very, very hard to find offers that have this much for one site. And I can say this, there's people who have SaberSim through SaberSim's website that have canceled on SaberSim to get SaberSim through us because we offer more. And I can say that. Yeah, I'll end it there, and see you guys later. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and best of luck tonight. See ya. Thank you for being here. Bye bye. See ya.